I want to welcome everyone to our session this afternoon. Respectfully, there are 25 other sessions going on right now. So I'm truly thankful for you all choosing to be here and explore how we can move forward together with one voice and one vision. My name is Garth Brown. I've been involved with the Faith Network considerations over the past 3 years. And it's only been in the last few days, literally 2 weeks ago, we were given the opportunity to bring this together. And again, seeing so many of you here today is a real blessing, and we're thankful. I'll start with our land acknowledgement. The 2025 National Conference on Ending Homelessness is being held on Teotake on the traditional unceded territory of the Kanen-Kaheka. The peoples of the Kanen-Kaheka Nation have lived on this territory since time immemorial. As traditional keepers of the land and waters, their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this territory. The Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness acknowledges the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples from coast to coast to coast who participate in this conference and lead the work to end homelessness across Turtle Island. So here we are. This is my first conference, the CAH conference. How many of you here are here for the first time with CAH? Oh, good. I'm not alone. I think we can all agree that it's an amazing experience. So much passion, so much purpose, and everyone really wants to meet the goal that CAH has brought forward. I don't know if I've been volunteered or voluntold, but I am a co-chair of a steering committee for the Faith Network. Laura Solberg is another representative who's, again, become a co-chair. She's from Vancouver, and she couldn't be here today. She's in Ottawa at another conference, but we certainly appreciate her work. She's actually put together a terms of reference for our group, a draft at least, that can be explored further. Whoops, if I get back here. There we go. And we're also very thankful to Tim Richter and the entire CAH team for supporting our Faith Network through the past months and certainly in the last 2 weeks to move forward and bring things together. I do want to make a note to thank Michael Shapcott. He had the vision back almost 4 years ago now to bring a Faith Network coast to coast together, and it was his inspiration and energies that bring us to where we are today. Ultimately, this Faith Network is not going to be CAH's Faith Network. It will be by name, but it will be your Faith Network. We truly want to make this as inclusive and broad as possible. And for that reason, several individuals are on the podium here today with me to share a bit of their story and show how we can all work together. And we don't know what we don't know. So as we come together today, we can focus on solutions and how we can make a difference in the lives of those most in need. You'll see a QR code here. Please scan it into your phones. It'll serve a couple of purposes. One, certainly, we'd encourage you and invite you to become subscribers, I'll call it, to the Faith Network. And that way, you'll be able to access and we will be able to send you information relevant to updates, initiatives, and other ideas that we feel are of value, whether you're in a rural or urban area or anywhere in between, that we can make sure that everyone's aware of what is being done in other parts of Canada and can consider if they have applications to their backyards as well. I think home means a lot to all of us. We probably all have a set of keys, either in our pocket or on our possession. And those keys open the door to a safe, secure space that we can anticipate being there for us when we get back to wherever we are in Canada. And home is where memories are made of. This is our granddaughter, so it's a couple of weeks ago. But that's what I carry with me as what the importance of home is. And as we heard in one of the sessions this morning, home for someone who is homeless is not a roof over the head as much as it is that safe, secure space. And we have a long way to go. As we know, in Canada, we have a much different story for so many people that we want to make a difference for together. I'll ask if we can take a moment of silence right now. We are a faith network, and as such, there should be no presumptions about what kind of reflection we each have. But I'd ask all of you to take a moment in your hearts and thoughts to think about why we're here today and how our presence here today can actually make a tangible difference in helping to influence the lives of others in need through our thoughts, words, and our actions. So I'd ask if we take a moment for that reflection, please. Thank you. I think the requirement to create a faith network is an ambitious goal, and when we were told that we'd be able to present today, or 2 weeks ago today, literally 2 Wednesdays ago, and then come together, really it was a focus on what could we do to make this happen. And I'm not sure if Elizabeth is in the room right now. No? Okay. But Elizabeth was kind enough to send over the funding that got the momentum going. And the funding was created through Porticus. They're an international lender to support faith initiatives. And their focus is to inspire, obviously, and to create a sense of purpose within faith groups. They want to be open to innovation, accountability, inclusion. One of the things I saw in their summary online is that they're reaching out to the younger generation. And I'm so excited to see so many younger people here. But I think our older guys, we've got a role to play in this as well, right? And I think there's still gas in the tank, so let's see what we can do in that respect. We'll share certainly some starting points that are on the slides ahead. But again, if you had a chance to scan, and we'll bring up that QR code a bit later, we'd love your contribution to your ideas and your thoughts about what the faith network should look like all the way through. The funding model provides for a staff person to gather all the information and assimilate it, to create a database that is inclusive and broad-ranging, not just in terms of the faiths involved, but the geographic locations of those faiths. And it's been exciting to speak to some people during and after sessions who are from, other parts of Canada that I would love to get to, haven't even seen yet. So we can all come together that way. The toolkit is something that has been discussed, and it will be worked on and grown over the months ahead. And again, by subscribing, we'll keep you posted on those achievements and what we've been able to capture and what we can share all around. And that database of faith communities will be there. I think in doing some research here, it came very apparent that faith groups and their efforts around homelessness and supports to homeless people are the best kept secret in Canada. There's always been a presence, and it continues to grow. So with our faith in action, and when you see blue on the screens, I'll ask you to take note of that, because these are some of the questions we'll be asking for your input. While we thought we might have some tables in the room here, we don't. So maybe afterwards we can kind of gather collectively in whichever way you can arrange to have some discussion about issues around not only what's happening as faith communities positively affect the community care, social work, shelters, youth work, street security, homelessness, and other supports, but also how we can expand that awareness of what's happening already and what we can do to help move things forward. So again, if you'd like to scan this, it's a different QR code, but this QR code will actually give you access to the draft terms of reference that our faith network has prepared, and it's certainly evolving. Nothing is cast in stone. The branding you see here on the side of the screens is not cast in stone. Our slogan is not either. We really want to move forward and integrate your ideas into our future. And that's the way it will not only begin, but we will continue all the way. So a couple of options as far as database in terms of how it's organized, how we complete. how we reach out and maybe even learn about non-faith initiated housing models that could be incorporated into faith initiatives further down the road. There's all sorts of opportunities and ambitions to learn and grow with every consideration. And we'll make this available online. Hopefully we'll be able to create an app so that it's available 24/7 for everyone. And again, that question in blue is, what else would you like to see in your toolkit? All right? What would you like to have available that will help you in your cause for your community? The database itself, obviously we want to include faith communities. There are a lot of interfaith communities already in Canada. Some of them are localized, some of them are regional, and some of them are provincial or territorial. We want to bottle those and make sure that we've got access for everyone so that they can be part of those localized or regional groups as much as a nationwide one like Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness wants to create. And as we move through, there will be social justice groups that we should likely align with. And there could be, again, other groups that we'd love your input on so that we can make sure that we're doing it right and that we're not excluding anyone from that process. That Porticus grant application started with the term up at the top there. Homelessness was created by policy. And I think when Loretta Ross spoke this morning, there was quite a bit of applause when it came up to the fact that if we don't have the, I'll call it the human will, I know it's political will, but if we don't have the human will, it's very hard to start a race when you don't have someone that's holding the gun to get things going. So we need to look at all those aspects all the way through. And in that context, we need to know beyond the database and the toolkit itself, what supports would you appreciate having? How could we, whether you're, again, in a city or a country setting, how can we reach out and provide some guidance and supports that way? I haven't introduced the panelists here, I'll call them, but they'll be speaking shortly to various slides specific to their interests. But you'll find out very quickly that there are already so many amazing minds and hearts working within the housing space affiliated to faith that we can all grow from and learn from together that way. So again, from a support standpoint, we'd love your ideas on what we can do to move forward. And what excited me as I put this together was the fact that faith groups are addressing the diversity of the continuum. Not only a focus on homelessness, but a focus right on through, in many cases, to market housing. And so we've got that opportunity to learn from that diversity of provision and find out what we can do to make a difference that way. Stepping away from housing for a second, certainly coast to coast, faith groups provide food. And that can be in the course of meals. This example in Hamilton is a church that provides meals to those in need, not just homeless people, but people who are precariously housed or just simply don't have enough rent or money at the end of the month. But they can be up to 700 meals a day that are being given to people in need every day of the year. And it's amazing. Other faith groups, of course, have food banks. And the usage of food banks is no secret. I heard it's been up from, in Toronto alone, 3 million to over 4.1 million visits last year. So we've had this incredible surge of need due to cost of living and all the other reasons. But what are faith groups doing to contribute to support those who are going hungry? When it comes to shelters, and I know, I'm sorry, your name again is? Your name is? Nadine. Yeah, Nadine shared, she's with the Salvation Army Women's Shelter here in Montreal. The Salvation Army, Good Shepherd, YWCA, and that's another division, YWCA in Montreal, right across the country. There are shelters that are operating because of the good works of the faith community who may have started an initiative, may not operate anymore, but without that initiation, nothing would have happened. So there are so many good works going on that we want to capture and share. And then on the street level, if you will, there are many initiatives like Invincible Housing as an example in Kelowna, that provides funding for households at risk of homelessness. So they'll provide utilities and rent support and other aspects to make sure that the family that's in a place does not lose that place that's so dear to them. Another focus, again, is legal rights and knowing how best to how to best approach a landlord when the landlord is doing things that don't seem just. Chances are they're not just. So we need to make sure that those options are available to residents whose literally lives could depend on the decisions they make all the way through. There's a YouTube link that takes you to a very well-researched YouTube presentation talking about tenant rights as it relates to landlords. It's based in Ontario, but there's relevance right across the country. Now into housing. So many amazing things are happening. What was supposed to be a 6-month temporary initiative in Halifax has been going now for 4 years. And that was to give people a warm, at least a roof over their head during the winter with these temporary emergency shelters. Some of the people who moved in there back in 2021, I believe, are still there to this day. There's just nowhere to transition to. Realities. And I might mention as well, by subscribing, what we'll do is we will provide the slide deck to you. But I'd like to go one step further, and on the slide deck we'll include references to the groups that are championing these causes so that you can reach out to them directly. Don't feel that you have to go through the Faith Network to get to them. We want to make sure that there can be direct access wherever we're allowed that permission to work that way. This is in Kitchener, Ontario, and 42 homes now exist where they're in their third site now because of community issues and whatever else, but they're on their third site now, and it looks they've been there for a couple of years now, so hopefully it's permanent. But they have obviously a room of their own, if you will, and then there's communal space for both kitchen and common area and washroom and showers. So this effort was really a community-driven one, grassroots one, led by some faith communities in the area. And as you can see, there's also a takeout hut just outside of one of the churches, which subsidizes the costs of operating the village that way. It's called a Better Tent City. Some numbers are here that are provided through Simon Fraser University. I know, Graham, you might touch on them to say they can be buffered a little bit, but there's a dramatic opportunity with faith-owned lands. And that can be churches, it could be rectories, it could be other properties that are available, underutilized, and prime for the conversion, if you will, or some sort of amalgamation of housing, depending on what's there. Of those 27,000 sites that have been accounted for across the country, a large number, I don't know if it's 9,000, but even if it's 6 or 7 or 8,000 are struggling financially, and they need to decide what the next steps are to make it work for them. An example of a recent conversion just last year, the building you see to the left became home for 35 individuals that, again, would not have had a home without the decisions of that faith community to move forward and do what they did. In Stony Creek, outside of Hamilton, a church had a former convent that was sitting dormant for years. I can't tell you how many years. And the Good Shepherd came in and renovated, and it's now home to 8 refugee women who had been on the streets in Hamilton and now have a home. Refugees account for over 50% of the homeless population and population within shelters in Hamilton. And I don't think that's a lot different than it would be in most urban centers right now across the country. This property, this school in West Toronto is owned by a church, and when we had an opportunity to speak to the bishops a year and a half ago, one of the bishop who is responsible for this, he grabbed me afterwards and said, "We've got something to talk about." And so first exploration on this, because often zoning is a big challenge for faith groups, to convert from religious applications to residential or a mix. that can be a bit of a hurdle that we all need to journey together on, and we'll provide support whatever we can to do that. But when we did the zoning on this, it turned out to be residential. Yeah, so we were able to just move forward and say, okay, that box is checked. Let's carry on now and move on to the next. So now they're looking very strongly at multi-story, multi-use residential, which is so exciting. This and again, that's a very urban example. Peterborough is a smaller community in Ontario. Again, at that same meeting with the bishop in Peterborough grabbed me, pulled me aside, said, let's talk about this. That little schoolhouse that you see there has been abandoned for over a decade. It's been more of a place where homeless people use to set up their encampments and all. And so we are now in a process of moving forward to develop that acre of land. Things happen for a reason. So up until May, we were going to be restricted to 3 stories maximum. And then the city of Peterborough lifted the height allowance. We're now looking at 6, maybe even more stories on that property. So we're hoping that to intensify it all the way through. And again, every faith community has different needs, right? In this particular case, we are partnering, and partnering is so important in every project, but we're partnering with groups who are supporting single moms and their children, and the senior homeless population, which is rampant in Peterborough. So we're looking at the needs and saying, here's what we need to create this appropriate space, both in the structure of the units, the common area on the main floor, the commercial space, if you will, with the daycare and other provisions for the community. All these things have to be brought into consideration, and there'll be expansion on that in the next few minutes. Congregate living models is something that came up just at a meeting before lunch. This is a home I opened back in 1990. It provides support for women initially, but now men who come off the streets, out of the encampments, out of their cars, and it's deeply affordable. We don't charge any more than the Ontario works, so the Ontario disability rate, so that people can get in there and without a dime out of their pocket, be able to survive with what little money they're given as a living wage, if you will, as people on that. I recently transitioned it to a charity called the Working Center in Kitchener a year and a half ago now, and they took it over. When I was meeting with the region, Waterloo Region staff, to explain what the benefits were, we shared that if you compared the deeply affordable rate of this compared to shelter costs, the savings to the community, to taxpayers, to you and I, were $10 million over the 3 decades. And that doesn't even touch the costs of emergency rooms and justice and all the rest. Everybody's nodding their head because we're all walking the same path in that respect. So it's an investment in people, and it provides support. The same model we've used now in Hamilton, one for men, one for a woman. Again, deeply affordable. No conditions on exiting, right? There's no window. You got to be out in 2 years or 1 year. That just adds anxiety to the mix. This can be a forever home if they are, I'll say, compliant with the guidelines, which basically evolve around abstinence and respect. These are not staffed properties, so we cannot have a harm reduction or other model. It is abstinence-based. And the people who live here love it because they're sober and they want to stay that way. And the minute that someone starts using, and it's happened, I'm not the one as landlord kicking people out. The tenants are, because that's disrupting their expectations, right? Their predictability. So the model works, and I certainly would welcome discussions with anyone and everyone who wants to look at an abstinence model that is so desperately needed that way. We've also expanded through the church in one of the churches in Hamilton to work with landlords who have, quite frankly, dilapidated buildings. And so what we've done is we've come in and floor by floor, we've renovated, and we've created a congregate living model for individuals. In this case, there were 3 refugees on one floor, 3 on another, who got the benefit of moving into a safe, secure home rather than being on the streets. And the head lease is with the church, so the landlord's happy because he gets regular payment, no issues. And then the rooms, if you will, are sublet at, again, an affordable rate to the individuals that way. The main floor as well is going through transition and will provide service to the homeless community at large. So there's a real focus on making sure those in need are taken care of in ways, and the lived experience voices are being listened to very clearly on what's going to happen on the main floor. And that's an important piece for all of us to take away. With multi-res housing, this is, again, a very small snapshot. Please provide examples of what you've witnessed in your communities or what your ambitions are in your communities. We would love to know what your successes are and what your hopes are for the future. And if we can help along the way, I think everybody here wants the same thing, and we'll be more successful collaboratively and collectively than we will if we just pioneer on our own and make mistakes that might have been avoided if we had had some guidance in the earlier stages or phases of that project. I want to start with Indigenous examples. Here we go. Colonialism is a reality. I think we certainly have witnessed a very strong recognition of that here in the last 2 days, and likely tomorrow as well, and that needs to continue. There's a lot of healing, a lot of rebuilding, and looking at things like Loretta Ross said this morning, looking at things in a whole new way can take us in a directions that I don't think any of us can even imagine in this room. So let's pray that we can move together and work together that way. So this is an example of a project underway in Hamilton. By next December, it's anticipated that it will house 40 individuals, and it's literally created and customized for their culture. And that's what's needed, intentional design all the way through. This property here, you can see in the top left corner, was a vacant lot in Halifax. And the home at the end there, or what looks like a home, it's called Hope Cottage. It's a soup kitchen that's been serving meals through St. Vincent de Paul over the past years. We haven't had a lot of traffic into that parking lot, as you can imagine, over those years. So it just made sense to reinvent a use for that space. And as you can see down below, just last week, the residents started moving into this property, serving older homeless individuals with autonomous living and supports all the way through. It can be done. There is a campaign worldwide called 13 Houses. It's through the St. Vincent de Paul group. This home finally is the first one to get on the map. 70 countries in the world are participating. Finally, Canada's on the map with it. So it's happening. Another example of, again, a multi-story 72-unit home in London, Ontario, has been created. The journey that's been taken to get to where it is right now, 3 stories high, occupancy next December as well. The journey has been one that can be shared with others, from fundraising to working with CMHC and other lenders, to having that understanding at the front end of a project can be so helpful. So I think we've got that opportunity to share our knowledge, and it's exciting to think what the potentials are that way. In Ottawa, the Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, you're from Ottawa, I know from the previous session.
Ottawa, Sallis, and I think the Veterans House is a multi-faith.
Yep. Yes, it is.
So we have a community developer that is in plan.
Wonderful, wonderful. I learned about this through one of the group on the Faith Network Committee who is Jewish, and Fran reached out to me, say, have you heard of multi-faith? And I knew of it, but I wanted her to expand, so she did. And so she provided me with so many examples of what they've done and what they're doing. The example in the top right corner there is amazing. 600 housing units are being planned for a property in Ottawa. Now, it won't be all affordable or deeply affordable. You need a mix. In most projects, you need some sort of a mix to make the projects financially sustainable. But ultimately, even if 200 homes are created for affordable use, fantastic, all the way.
One community is the Haven.
Ah, okay.
Market in the Haven.
There you go, alrighty. And again, the full focus is, again, not just to build it, but build it environmentally friendly. Right, so LEED certified, all the aspects of energy conversion or conservation have to be considered every step of the way. Some other examples here, all the way through. And there's one of their homes for veterans is mentioned in the bottom corner, exclusively for veterans who are homeless or at risk of being homeless. Great works. Across to the other side of the country, in British Columbia, we have an example of St. Vincent de Paul and Vancouver Island, who have created housing projects and have other projects on the horizon. So exciting work going on there. And I'd like to invite to the podium here Bishop Anna Greenwald-Lead, who is from British Columbia as well, and can share her personal journey and that of her diocese with all of you. Bishop, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bishop Anna. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Bishop of the Diocese of British Columbia, or as we prefer to call it, the Diocese of Islands and Inlets. It's the diocese that encompasses all of Vancouver Island and the islands, the Gulf Islands and the Broughton Elder Pago. It's not very close to Britain or Columbia, so we prefer the name Islands and Inlets. We have a long history of colonialism, though, as an Anglican church and as in that part of the world. So our diocese comprises the unceded territories of over 50 Indigenous nations, making it probably one of the most diverse dioceses in the world. Those nations are divided roughly into three groups: the Nuu-chah-nulth people on the west coast of Vancouver Island, the Kewak people in the north, and the Coast Salish peoples further in the south. What a lot of people don't know is that in 1849, before British Columbia joined Confederation, all of Vancouver Island was leased to the Hudson's Bay Company by the Crown for 7 shillings a year, which is as little money as it sounds. It was pocket change then as it's pocket change now. And they were given that lease so that they could colonize on behalf of the Crown, Vancouver Island. So this is all before Vancouver Island, before British Columbia becomes a province. And it's in those very early years that our diocese was given land grants by the Hudson's Bay Company. So I know it's not this slide, but if I keep going. So that's our very large cathedral in downtown Victoria. And it is on land that was granted to the Anglican diocese pre-Confederation by the Hudson's Bay Company. And so we're very aware that the land holdings that we hold are a legacy of colonialism. We have 47 churches on Vancouver Island, and we are looking at redeveloping a number of them. And the first thing that we do is we figure out the history of that particular piece of land and how we came to possess it. And so on our website, if you go to it, you'll find land stories, and it's really fascinating actually to hear how we got some of the land that we have. And a lot of it we got in the 1800s, so it takes some real historical work to go back and figure that out. But as we're looking at what to do with our land holdings, that's where we start. We have a long history as a diocese of creating affordable housing, mostly affordable housing for seniors. The one on the bottom left there is one of the older ones. It's called Rogers Court. It's only 24 units of affordable housing, and it was built in the 60s. And one of the challenges we're facing right now is places like that are coming to end of life in terms of like heating systems and plumbing and things like that. And also the folks that live in them need higher supports than we're able to give them. And 24 units is not sustainable in terms of staffing. So one of the conversations that's going on is letting go of some of those sites and moving the folk sort of up the picture. So the biggest affordable housing program we have is Dawson Heights, which until recently had about 200 units of affordable housing for seniors. We just opened another 85 in the fall. And we're actively talking about moving the folks from Rogers Court to Dawson Heights, because Dawson Heights has staff on site and is more able to provide supports, and then that would open up the site at Rogers Court for other possibilities. We have another, I don't think we have a picture of it, we have another very small one called Crescent Homes. Oh yeah, there it is, bottom left, which is outside of Duncan in the land that is really unceded from the Cowichan tribes. And so there's ongoing conversations with the Cowichan tribes about giving that land back to Cowichan, and Cowichan working with us to create affordable housing on that site, which they are desperately in need of. So we have a lot of land, very little of it is zoned for housing. It pisses me off how long it takes to get land rezoned. Dawson Heights was $10 million over budget because it took us 2 years to get a development permit out of Saanich. Saanich then came to the opening of Dawson Heights and gave themselves a big pat on the back for having helped do this, and I tore a strip into them. And they're promising to do better. So one of my hopes for the faith community is that we can leverage our shared voice when it comes to things like rezoning. It shouldn't take as long as it takes to get religious lands rezoned for developing affordable housing, and once they're rezoned, it shouldn't take as long as it takes to get development permits done. And municipalities don't understand the costs. That a 2-year delay on getting a DP is another $10 million, which means that Dawson Heights doesn't have as many deeply affordable units as it was supposed to have when we started off, because the $10 million meant that more of them had to be closer to market in order for us to get that done. So that's the kind of stories we need to keep telling so that we can advocate for the work that we do. The only other thing I will say is that we also get a lot of pressure on our churches to open cold weather shelters. We tend to resist. If you know the book of Micah, do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. Cold weather shelters are not justice, they are kindness. And so often Christians get sucked into doing kindness and loving justice instead of doing justice. And so my kind of message always to my churches is this justice? And often the things that the government is asking us to do in terms of cold weather shelters is actually, I would say, below our moral threshold. Only opening up beds when it's -3 for more than 3 days in a row and raining is not justice. And when we do that, I think we're accomplices in perpetuating a system. And so that's one of the other things that churches really have to do is look at what we are and are not willing to do with our resources. So, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. It's words spoken from the heart and from the source. She's walking the talk. Thank you. The cathedral that Anna referenced, this appeared on the cover of a publication by Simon Fraser University. And there's a link at the bottom, which again, subscribe and we'll get to the entire piece here. But that link takes you to a phenomenal guide on faith-based property development. And inside of that guide, it includes 3 or 4 pages of references, some of which will, with groups that you might be familiar with, and if not, you will be familiar after the next few minutes. One of the links is to Let's Open Doors, which is an Indwell publication. And Indwell is a group based in Hamilton, but covering southwestern Ontario. And Justin's here today to share that. I'll just bear with me a second, Justin. I just got to make sure we're on the right slide here. I'm going to jump to supportive housing first, and then we'll swing with Indwell, which is all about supportive housing. And these are examples. I became a St. Vincent de Paul member of Ascension back in 2018, 19. Phenomenal what's done in terms of home visits and all the rest in terms of serving those in need. Then I started trying to find out, well, what's been happening on the housing front. In Australia, St. Vincent de Paul is one of the housing providers throughout the country, like thousands of homes. Here, I began to be pleasantly surprised to find out that the Toronto Central Council has been operating homes of this nature since the 70s. And not only do they provide supports for, let's call it smaller standalone homes, but they also operate this example in North York in Toronto. So faith communities have the strength to do so much more than we even imagine right now, all the way through. I'd like to take a break from the housing side, just ask Paul to come forward to speak to what we can do when people do get housed, how we can help keep them housed. So Paul, I'll ask you to come forward.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Paul Curley, and I represent the Anglican Diocese here in Montreal. And this was rather, we weren't expecting to do this, and I just met literally Garth just a week ago, right, on a phone call. And I shared a bit about what I have done in the past, and I spoke about my mentoring that I've done in terms of those who are rehoused. And he thought, well, actually, that's a good idea, because we do talk a lot about the obvious need of housing, but what happens after these folks who are then rehoused, and in terms of the skills, whatnot, that they need to remain in housing. And so one of the charities this is not what I do now, but this was previously in a charity that mentored those who were rehoused because of the recidivism rate. Now, I don't know what now there on the slide I do mention about Canada. It's not well documented because there is no comprehensive national stats in terms of that. But I did ask my very good mate ChatGPT in terms of getting some idea, and it was 24%, but this was just one study done by the University of Toronto, and really dealing with youth rehousing who then go back. The charity I worked for, and this was my time in London, I did put UK, so I'm talking about the original London, not the one in Ontario. Just to clarify, this is Canada, so when I say London, people usually think Ontario. Anyway, and so it was within this charity, it was a program called Home for Good, which was part of a larger charity called The Passage. And in terms of the people, and The Passage itself was worked with many, many partnerships in terms of helping people get into housing, dealing with mental health illnesses, or if they had any dependency issues, to get them into housing. But what they saw was that there was approximately about 60% of those that went back. And the question is why? If you're a rough sleeper, then rehoused, why would you go back onto the streets? And a lot of it had to do with isolation and losing the social networks they've had in their life on the streets, and then they get put into housing into an area where they have no connections, no relationships, no social networks. And so the charity realized there was a need in terms of creating this program to mentor, so helping these individuals with whatever they need to connect with the neighborhoods that they've been housed into. And so the mentoring program was based on a year program, and it was geographical. So depending on the volunteers who were a part of that, we would be partnered with those within the area of London that we were living in, because obviously we were more familiar with our neighborhoods and what services are offered there. And it was a year, and because we didn't want it to become a situation of where it becomes a dependent relationship. It was about empowerment, right? It's about getting them connected with, if there's any organizations in terms of if they had dependency issues in the neighborhood, and a bit of hand-holding initially of going with them to the meetings. It's just going to your local GP and registering. It's about, okay, what are your interests, and looking, okay, what about meetup? Let's say, are there any groups meeting of things that you may have interest in, and so on, and things like that. And so it was really about a lot of hand-holding initially, but ensuring that it doesn't become a relationship of dependency. And one of the rules was after the year, we no longer communicated, just to ensure that. And there were other support measures put in place for us volunteers. We would meet usually bi-monthly to come together to share our experiences and also seek help from our own experiences if we're finding a challenge in terms of the current relationship or partnership that we're in. And also other outside organizations that we partnered with would come in, such as those dealing with mental health or issues, or also with issues with any type of dependencies, to help us with the skills ourselves as volunteers in dealing with the partnerships we had. But so I thought it might be a bit better to share a bit about an actual story. So as you can see, there's a photo of there. And this was one of the relationships or partnerships that I got involved with this person named Abby. And as you can see from the photo, that was taken maybe about 2 weeks ago. Okay, I lie. 2 months, no. All right, 10 years, okay. And so Abby was a very interesting person, and so the way it worked was the fact that he would have a caseworker with this charity, and we would have an initial meeting with someone who was his caseworker and then the person who would be partnered with. And he was, by trade, an electrical engineer, and who had a social drug habit, or what would you call that? But not severely, but he did on occasion delve into drugs.
Call it being on the substance use health spectrum.
Right, okay.
Is the language.
Okay. Anyway, so he was raised by his mom, and they had a very, very close relationship. Well, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he was working. He had his own flat, very successful in his career as an electrical engineer. But obviously, due to having to cope with the situation, or in his case, not being able to process what was happening and accept what was happening with the impending death of his mom, he became addicted. And through that, obviously, he lost his job. Losing his job, lost his flat, and, well, we all know where this goes. Long story short, he was on the streets. He eventually got partnered with one of the partnerships with Passage in terms of dependencies, and went on to a program to get himself clean. And so when I was partnered with him, it was about close to the 1-year mark that he was clean and rehoused. And so the one question that whenever I went into a new relationship in terms of this partnership, the one question I would always ask is I look for the immediate need. Okay, they're rehoused now, but what do they need at that moment? And so I asked him, what do you need at this point? And he said, I need structure. Because all he was doing is just staying inside his flat. He wasn't engaging with the community. He wasn't doing anything. And one thing and so I asked him, what do you like? I mean, did you have any interests? And he says, well, I used to run. And fortunately, I'm a runner. And so I thought, okay, in our weekly meeting, let's get together and just start running. And, I'll plan out the route and all that. And then, so we started doing that. And it was he didn't always show up initially, to be honest with you. But as I was more persistent in making sure in our weekly that he would start showing up, and running is a bit of a high itself. And so the endorphins afterwards, and so you start feeling better about yourself. And it gave him more focus. And at that point, I was able to then connect him with, I don't know if you heard about Park Run. For those who are runners, it's now quite global that within parks within the city, there are those that organize a 5K run on a Saturday. And so I found a local park run that he could connect with and went with him initially, just so he can start making relationships with the other runners who live in the neighborhood, to start building those social networks. So that was the first bit. Second bit, I'm very pragmatic, and so it was about, okay, let's look at your future now. And let's look at employment. I mean, obviously, having a degree in electrical engineering, I thought, let's get you back out there in terms of visibility. And so we looked at creating a LinkedIn profile in terms of what he's done in the past, right? And so that was the next stage. And lo and behold, being in that special area of electrical engineering, long story short, in the end, he was eventually hired working for the National Grid in England. So quite a good outcome. I mean, what more could one ask for? So yeah, I look back at the beginning, our first meeting, I just remember him very withdrawn and timid. He would not even look me in the eye. And then our last meeting come to that one-year program of him being very engaged, being able to speak to me, and he said, and I asked him, and I mentioned that to him. I said, the first time I met you, you didn't look at me. He says, and I said, why? And he said, because I was too ashamed. Yeah. Because he felt a lot of shame about how he ended up in a situation. And so this program, it's really individually based, because every person and other relationships that I've had, or the partnerships, it's about taking people for where they are at that moment, because they're all going to be at different stages of their development in terms of moving on and ensuring that they remain in housing. And so we have to take it from a very personalistic stage of where they are and build upon that. So it's not one, size fits all, but it's really thinking through, what does this person need at this moment, at this time, to help them continue their journey and ensure that they remain in housing and hopefully continue on in the rest of their lives, in relationships, in work, etc. So anyways, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paul. Who was the faster runner?
I was at the time because I run marathons, and he was just starting to run, but believe me, he has let's say the natural physique to be able to run faster.
There you go. All right.
So I'm sure he's doing much faster now.
Yeah, thanks for your good work
Yeah.
and for sharing it. Lovely story. All righty. I touched on Indwell earlier. Indwell is sort of the name to be recognized in our neck of the woods because of all the good works they do. So at this time, I'll ask Justin to come forward and elaborate on the amazing work they complete. And their faith connection, too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, Justin.
Hi, I'm Justin DeWard. So I'm a regional director with Indwell. And if you're not familiar with Indwell, we're a Christian charity that creates affordable housing communities for people seeking health, wellness, and belonging. That's our mission statement. So we're the developers and the landlord, and we're also providing on-site support, including healthcare supports. When we talk about being a Christian organization and what that means, for me, that really ties into our values as an organization. We talk about the inherent dignity of every single person, and dignity not being something you give to somebody, but that's already there. I love how you talk about the relationships, like loving our neighbor and living that out in our supports and in our interactions with our tenants, essential to what we're doing. And this idea of having hope for the future and helping people see hope for their own future. So those three things being baked into everything that we're doing. Indwell, currently we have we support 1,300 tenants in 9 different communities, and we have another 650 units in development right now. But when Indwell started 50 years ago, just started with one person and one family. So the Prinzen family seeing a need and saying, oh, we want to do something. So taking their 2 kids and making them share a bedroom so they can invite somebody else to come live in the home with them. And they were part of a church community, which then grew with them, which became the first housing program that Indwell developed. And that's pretty consistent with how we've seen Indwell grow over the years. It starts at that grassroots level of people who see need and want to respond, and it's often churches and faith communities coming together to say, we want to do something, and that creates the motivation and the momentum for municipalities and for other groups, and then the province and then the federal government to do something new. We get approached pretty regularly by different churches and different groups saying, hey, we'd like to partner with Indwell to do something new. So So one of the ways we've been able to respond to that is create this online resource, which has been helpful for churches to then explore, like, hey, is partnering with Indwell something we want to do? It's a pretty detailed tool that a church and other groups can use as well to explore as leaders, is this something we want to do? A lot of it comes down to, do we have shared values, and do we have a shared vision for what we want to do? Do we want to be part of addressing homelessness and creating supportive housing together? And if we have that shared part, then how that actually plays out can look a lot different. I'm going to focus just on the buildings side of things, but partnership is much broader than that. So one of the more recent partnerships that come up is Stonehouse Apartments. So what's unique about this is Wentworth Baptist Church is doing what's called a vendor take-back mortgage. So they will continue to own the property, but instead of us paying rent, our rent payments are going towards purchasing the building. So then we'll buy that. So that's one way it's been able to work. North End Landing, this was a church in Hamilton that had outgrown their space and was looking to build a new building. And in that process of deciding how they're going to build a new building, saw this need in their community for housing. So they actually built their church with 45 apartments above it. So Indwell does not own this building, but we do provide the on-site supports for the tenants that are living there. St. Mark's Place, this is in Kitchener, and this was a church, again, they had an extra property, and rather than sell it for the highest possible value that can go for expensive condos that it's just going to perpetuate some of the problems we're seeing, they sold it to Indwell at half of the market value. So that's now 40 units of affordable housing. Magnolia Apartments, very similar. The church in this one, the Lutheran Church will continue to own the property, but they lease it to Indwell. And then the last one I'll show here, this is one of the buildings I get to work at in Simcoe, Ontario. And this was St. James United Church, had a school, like a church school property. But as the church evolved and changed, they didn't need that building anymore. So they sold this building then to Indwell, which was able to be renovated for 40 apartments as well. So lots of different ways that you can make the properties work. Again, starting with that same part of having shared values and a shared vision.
Beautiful. Come on, yeah. Yeah, you're getting cheers. Come on.
And that's just a fraction of what Indwell's up to. So it's
That's right.
superb all the way. And I got to thank Justin. We were on a Zoom meeting on Friday, and here we are today. So thank you so much for being part of let's look at a national movement all the way through. I think the carrying on with the movement, Reverend Graham Singh is here with Relevin and is going to expand on the good works they're doing. So.
Thanks a lot, Garth. And it really has come together quickly, but it's this conversation so far has exceeded my expectations, and I hope it has for you as well, just seeing all of this beautiful content. And before going through here, I wanted to comment on a couple of things that have been said so far. We're not going to be around tables, so to try to bring some of these conversations. I loved, Garth, how you flip between those small, normal residential homes used as group homes, and then you switch to some 600 units. And there's almost an assumption that those 600-unit new builds are more important. And I want to say I don't actually believe that. And I know we should believe more units is always better. But those properties that we've been good at, that we built in local neighborhoods, that have created natural affordability and natural support in natural neighborhoods, really do need to be preserved. And that is something that has really animated me in my own journey. Garth has outed me. I was going to not tell you I was a reverend until later on in what I said, but there we go. We're slightly overrepresented in the Anglican Church up here on the panel today.
And that needs to change too with the faith
We'll change that. We'll get going on that very quickly. We need everyone. My name is Singh. And so very often, pour nos amis québécois, ça leur confus. It's pretty confusing for a Quebecer seeing a brown-skinned guy called Singh, who's an Anglican minister and then speaks in French. So that's just the way we like to roll here. But one of the things that really was part of my formation following my studies at London School of Economics in the area of decolonization of my father's country in the Caribbean was seeing churches go through despair. And in the Church of England, which had become my home church by that point, we were part of seeing over 8,000 churches closed. And in that country, there's a national church. That's an interesting part of the colonial journey. I love how Bishop Anna gave you that story of the Hudson's Bay Company. You may also notice that almost every one of the European colonial churches quietly thinks of themselves as kind of the national church of Canada. And of course, none of them ever have been or are. The closest would be the Catholic Church in Quebec. But of course, there is that colonial story. In England, there really is a national church. And in some ways, the problem hit them harder and sooner. And as a result, there was a new team formed called the Closed Churches Team. And I was recruited into being one of the first 12 people ordained into that specific ministry. So I've never really been a normal Anglican minister. I don't know if there are any normal ministers. I see the chaplain of the Women's Shelter of Salvation Army here in Montreal. So we're all unique in our work, but certainly you're seeing people here that, you know, when you look at the church, or you look at communities of faith. I had to point out to somebody earlier when they were saying, oh, urbanists have now concluded that we need a 15-minute walkable city. And I said, hey, hold on a second. Have you ever spoken to a Muslim who will explain to you that the Islamic culture in many different Islamic cultures has seen mosques built within 5 minutes of where every Muslim can pray for hundreds of years? So these concepts predate us. There are things that we can revive that are really exciting, and they go across faiths in many ways. Some of the figures that we've looked at, that 27,000 number, kind of haunts me. And Garth, you mentioned that I would add some more color to that. You heard it this morning in the conversation this morning. It haunts us because it came from our research director originally, Dr. Mike Wood-Daly, who is kind of the master of looking at the CRA T3010 data on religious charities. And as we've underlined for government many times, of Canada's 86,000 charities, religious charities are the single largest group. And together they own approximately 27,000 properties. Of those, some 12,000 are places of worship. The rest are other types of properties. Some are convents and monasteries, which are very interesting for housing. Do you know we could deal with the on-street homelessness bed requirement in Canada tomorrow with monasteries and convents that already exist? They have bedrooms, they have doors that don't really close that well, they don't have heating systems that work. There is pipes in the building, they don't work very well either. But they're better than a tent, and we can do this. So there are other types of properties, but the 27,000 number is a little bit misleading for that reason, and it got picked up by the Simon Fraser study, which, again, Garth, you've underlined. And one of the groups I really want to underline today, as Garth asked us all to help prepare for this, I really wanted to underline how much work has been done already. And one of those groups is called the Expert Community on Housing, hosted at CMHC. A number of us here in the room have been part of that. I'm the co-chair or something like that of that group. Excuse me. That really is a multi-faith story. And the story for Islamic housing, for Jewish concerns around housing, for Sikhs, they're very, very different. And I really do appreciate the work that's been done at the federal government. And, you know, my response to Bishop Anna in terms of how are we going to move municipalities together, I do truly believe that a multi-faith approach is required for this conversation in order to influence government. If government is seen to be responding to the privilege of any one religion, which is always going to be Christian in this country, it won't move. And it's one of those things that as we say, how dare you, church, be involved in trying to do these things? You've done A, B, C, you've done all these things. I really believe we need to engage those things and say, yes, those things have happened. Now, how are we going to move forward into that? Because we are still the largest single landowning element of the charitable sector in Canada. There are other groups like Street Level. That was mentioned as a turnaway phrase. There's actually a group called Street Level. Is anybody a member of Street Level here? of Christian homeless shelters in Canada. And they have been doing an incredible work in gathering, and they're there as well. Groups like Yonge Street Mission, anybody know that group? They've actually run some seminars on helping business people in Toronto truly experience what it is like for somebody leaving poverty to stay out of poverty based on the social supports that are available. So it's helping the young mom whose partner dies, who finds herself on her own with 2 or 3, understanding is the minute she was working as a practical nurse, now she's working as a registered nurse, her salary went up a little bit and all of her supports now fall away. And that's from Yonge Street Mission, which again is there as well. There are also groups around, there are studies we'll point to on here. In the US, there's a study I will add to the list here of looking at 20 churches that undertook affordable housing projects. As I looked at them, I wish they had Indwell around, I'm afraid. But 10 of them were sued, all of them by their neighbors. So this is NIMBYism gone to the extreme. And this is really serious, and I go back to my point about naturally affordable, acquired rights, supportive housing in communities. When we have that 12-person manse or former monastic property that's sitting in a street corner, it's been there for 40 years, we gotta hold on to it. And it's one of those things, Bishop Anna, you're hearing from a bishop that's ahead of a panic curve. Most of our 150 or so bishops in Canada are on the other side of that panic curve. And the first thing they will do is sell exactly those properties. And because they're trying to keep the show on the road, and we're seeing where that's going. So the idea of NIMBYism and studying affordable housing done by religious communities is something there as well. Those are a couple of comments I wanted to make there. I want to make sure you just know what's available from Relevin. Our vision, we did establish a non-religious charity to deal with this work here in Canada. My bishops in England gave me permission to come back to Canada. I was invited to this diocese by Bishop Mary, who's the first female bishop of Quebec. That helps in Quebec as well, helps in Canada. Only to be replaced by our first Black African Francophone bishop in the Anglican Diocese in the Anglican Church of Canada, which we're very proud of. Again, I have fun with Quebecers here. I've been here for 10 years. That one also throws them for a total loop. They're like, how is this even possible? Yeah, that's the way we roll. So as great as that is, we knew we needed to set up a non-religious entity. So we have helped a number of Muslim communities enter former churches. We've helped our first synagogue. Interestingly, it's actually somebody like Paul, specifically on the area of legal supports for the precariously housed, that a synagogue put in as their first tenant. So he's a private lawyer, but became their first tenant. And these are the kinds of ways in which we're opening up those sites as well. So I think the stories we're hearing, Garth, I learned something about Garth, that he used to work for Yellow Pages. And that has helped me understand a lot of what we've heard so far. This is like Garth putting together the Yellow Pages here of how faith communities can help engage in homelessness. Well, we've also done this with specifically trying to set up a charity engaged in the transformation of religious property. So that's what Relevin is. We originally called the Trinity Centers Foundation because we didn't want to scare the bishops. And then we realized the bishops get scared of lots of things anyways. Let's call it something else that everybody else understands. And we named this after the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 11 on sustainable cities and communities, and the leaven, the yeast that gives rise to all communities, qui marche en anglais, en français. And if you don't know that this has a faith-based component, you wouldn't guess. We've got a kind of hideout name. And do you know how we got this name? We went through 3 different branding agencies, and it didn't work. And I got on my knees and prayed. I said, Lord, you've got to give me a bilingual name that works for institutional investors and for the church and for government. And that's how we got that name. So this is the organization that we've set up specifically on the issue of transition of existing religious land. You've heard about that need. Within that final number, if I can leave you one final number, of the 12,000 places of worship in Canada, just over 4,000 of those have had a deficit budget for the last 3 years and have less than that deficit amount times 3 left in the bank, as in they're going broke within the next 3 years, for sure. That's at least a third of the buildings you know of with a steeple, okay? Now, can we turn those all into housing? By no means. Can we run night shelters and cold weather shelters? By no means. Can we turn them all into parkland for municipalities? By no means. But could we do some of those things in some of the times? We can. One of our views is, though, one of our strong views, is that congregations, when they're facing very difficult times, tend to make bad decisions on their own. And if we support them with housing from the beginning, I'm looking at Ron Ray. We have one of the most senior architects in Montreal, Ron Rayside, who's here, who's led urban planning conversations in regions. And, you know, the work of experts in this area is enormous. But very often, they have teams that have to be paid for. But the question is, what kind of team do we need here? Are we building a community hub? Are we building housing? What kind of housing is it? There's no way in which the congregation is going to know the answer to that before they get started. We call this pre-development. And we have, thanks to a number of generous foundations, established a series of funds. Some are grant-based funds, some are loan-based funds, to help congregations with that first part that they might call, what is God calling us into? And we prefer to not see any developer on scene until they've answered that question. Because the question of debt was risen. A developer signing a piece of paper is a debt. They are spending those pre-development dollars that they expect to get back, even when they're a very well-behaved, not-for-profit developer. So that is some of the resources we've put in place for those congregations, and that's our focus on those as well. Communities in need, I don't think we need to explain to this room the great need of these properties going forward. We have 4 units that help. The first is a property strategy course for church board members. It's funded by CMHC and the Charis Foundation. We then started charging for it because it made whole boards would do it, and that seemed to be better. And then we had a Lutheran denomination that actually gave us money to give it for free to all the Lutherans. And that worked better. So we've now got some other people to give us money for free. So we now give that away. It's fully available on YouTube, the entire course. If you look for Re11, you don't need to sign up for anything. You don't need to scan any QR codes. You just go on YouTube, Re11, you can get it. And they're in 20-minute sections. And if you only want to do one section, go ahead. We would hope you would do all of them. One of those sections is with a for-profit developer. Another is with a not-for-profit developer. One is talking about property valuations, etc. So it's a free resource available, Re11 Learning, thanks to our funders for making that possible as a free resource. Our placemaking practice is what works with congregations to do that pre-development. We had a congregation that came to us and said, we have a property in West Toronto and we want to serve the community. And we said, what do you mean? And they said, well, we really think that Black people, gay people, and Indigenous people should be the beneficiaries of what we do. And we said, oh, that's exciting. What does that look like? They said, well, we're going to do the following things. We're going to sell our manse and then we're going to fix up our church. And we said, have you actually met any gay people, Indigenous people, or Black people? Because there certainly weren't any obviously in their congregation. They said, we don't know any, but we know what they want. And we said, that is unacceptable. We need to take time, and we help them congregate. We help them meet all 3 of those communities. In the end, there's a tough one. Thank you for the Hamilton show. I'm loving, no, you keep going. You're bringing so much energy to this conversation. I love it. And I am a pastor at heart, so more of that will get me to the end of my part sooner, which I will get to quite quickly. They said, we don't like this site at all. You're in the totally wrong neighborhood. 2 kilometers up the road is where everything needs to happen. And that was used with the Community Foundation, the United Way, a number of other parts of the congregation. That property was sold for condos. Okay, you ready? You can do the sound effect of doom, doom, doom. However, the money was taken from that, and a new community center was built in exactly where it needs to be. Those are the hard decisions that we need to face up front, and we like to do them before the housing question goes too far. The element we launched this summer is actually it's a second charity in Canada here. It's Canada's first charity real estate brokerage, Re11 Realty. It is a fully licensed Ontario real estate brokerage, which can now operate with any broker anywhere in Canada. The idea is to help sell a property when it is coming up for sale. And those 4,000 churches, very often, that's what's happening. They don't want to talk to anybody. Often, again, I'm not going to look at Bishop Anna every time I mention bishops, but I got to tell you guys, there's times where bishops will call us and say, please, we don't want to talk to anybody. We don't want to, this is not coming in the public domain. You got to just get this church sold. That's it, that's all. there are times where we want to do the best we can in those situations, and those are the other reasons we've set up our own brokerage to say, for heaven's sakes, let's try to get it to a municipality, try to get it to some other nonprofit, and we set up the brokerage. And the final is our transition fund. It's a new $30 million fund funded by the Federal Social Finance Fund, a number of generous foundations, which can offer loans of between $1 and $5 million for nonprofit organizations who are acquiring religious properties that are in transition. That is being replaced or added to by another proposal that we have in the public domain. If you find me on LinkedIn, you'll see we are pushing actively with the Minister of Finance, François-Philippe Champagne, for the provision of a federal guarantee on a larger bond issuance. I can't say too much more about it other than what is in the public domain right now. We may get nothing out of this budget, or it may be a massive change. If you feel like chirping in the social media to make a difference, this is the week to do it. So please do. I can't tell you enough. Find us on LinkedIn. And even if you say, this sounds insane, somebody should come up with something better than this, but at least this is better than, I don't care what you, just chirp if you can, please. Because ministers are listening, and look, we are using our federal balance sheet right now for mines, pipelines, nuclear reactors. We are using it for housing, but all of the other parts that are releasing housing around this, we had Build Canada Homes with us last week at the, yesterday, with Waterloo Region. Maybe it comes under Build Canada Homes, but we are shooting for the stars here and saying we need this help for these kind of groups as well. These are some of our sites. Some, probably our most fun one was putting 3 Muslim communities into a closed United Church on Friday for Friday rentals. We launched that on Good Friday, which was in the middle of Ramadan, and the Muslims made food for the Christians to celebrate their holy day. That kind of broke the news in Edmonton, and it was kind of cool, so we're excited for that one. St. Jack's, we have a circus company in the church at St. Jack's. Montreal is the capital of the circus sector. We have 10,000 employees here, and we hang circus artists from there. We also have 4 churches and over 100 nonprofits that share that space. And when it comes to urban planning and tax exemptions and permitted use and building code, that is our hotspot site, and we're looking to fight a battle that there's an open door on right now with the City of Montreal we're pushing through. St. Stephen's is becoming hospital access Indigenous housing. Knox has become a hotel. You can do the sound effect again, right? Because we think we want everything to become affordable housing. It's not going to happen. There are times where that is not the outcome we can do, but the church still gets to meet in there on Sundays, right on the high street in Stratford. In London, the Cathedral District, our largest partnership is with the Anglican Diocese of Huron. It's 150 churches west of Kitchener-Waterloo towards Sarnia-Windsor. And we started working with the bishop there, and we said, let's just avoid the cathedral, shall we? Because we don't want to scare anybody. And the cathedral wrote us an angry letter and said, we heard you've been avoiding us, and you don't think we're ready for change. You're wrong. We're more ready for change than all the rest of these churches. Come and see us right away. And they asked us for what the crazy version was. We said, well, we'd have to study it carefully and hire the professionals. And they said, well, for instance, what could it be? I said, well, it could be an arts hub with the municipality, and you could sell off the 2 office towers you own for affordable housing, do an office to residential conversions. And they said, okay, that's it, be it resolved, let's go. And they hadn't hired I don't know if you know this, Anna, but they hadn't hired the new dean by that point. And when new dean came in, he had to kind of take in all this story from there. But you know what? In 3 council sessions, the municipality agreed to do exactly that. And it's a pretty cool story. We're going forward from there. St. Matthew's Lutheran came to us and said, if you come near us with your circus people, you're dead. There's no way we're putting circus people in this Lutheran church. This is a good old-fashioned church. And then we put a ballerina in a picture instead. We thought that was more conservative. They said, take your ballerina out, forget it. Then we found out the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony Orchestra had gone bankrupt. And we intervened with a bankruptcy judge and said, would you allow that orchestra to be relocated into an old Lutheran church? And it's like a cathedral-type church right on Benton Street. They said yes. And that's where the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony Orchestra is now licking its wounds. It got kicked out of the center in the square. This is why we're making the argument that alongside housing outcomes, arts and culture outcomes, as a lot of theaters close. You know Coldplay, the band? In the year they launched, they played at 34 different venues. You know how many of those venues are still open today? Only 11. That's how fast arts venues are closing. So we'd like to see an alliance there as well, and we'd like you all, as the community that would love to see all religious land become housing, we'd like you to also see some of those others as well. There, I'm going to close to there. You'll see some of those. This is one we lost. Ron knows all about this one. It's not a park next door. It's a condo. It wasn't our land. But we turned that around and said, city that wanted a park, could you buy our green space on that site? And that's exactly what we've done. We sold the green space for $3.2 million. That's allowed us to do the masonry. And it's another outcome. Again, turning the Rubik's Cube on these sites. So you can see some of this on our website from there. This is some more about the Transition Fund. But I know we want to make more space for conversations. We're glad to be here too. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I did not know what to expect. As you can tell, a lot of invitees were brought in last minute, but I thank you for your rich sharing and all the good works you're doing that way. I guess the whole session has gone a little bit differently than we expected, with table discussions and interaction and all the rest. So we'll have to turn on a bit of a dime and focus on, we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to fly through another aspect of homelessness or precariously housed. I guess the realization is that, yes, we have exposed homelessness. All of the individuals that come into our congregate homes have to be on the housing wait list. There's an asterisk beside 300,000 because that's conservative. There are over 100,000 documented households on the wait list in Toronto alone. I suggest there's over 300,000, but you can't find, even chat doesn't tell me how many people are on the housing wait list across the country. But ultimately, the surge is incredible. It's doubled in Halton region, affluence, but there's a doubling of people on the housing wait list now. And I've been, over the past decade, creating legal secondary suites intentionally to create housing for people coming off the wait list, for families coming off the wait list. Many of them, moms and their kids coming from abusive relationships, and it works. So I thought I'd share this with you because this has been a faith-driven ambition. So much support from church communities and other communities throughout the past decade that has made a difference, not only in the mom's life, but in generations to follow. So I'd like to share very quickly what's happening here. If you know a homeowner, there's a good chance that their home is zoned already for a detached or an internal unit on their home. They can generate additional home equity immediately, generate positive cash flow in terms of income, meet their own family needs, because that's where it starts. We've got to talk to the family who owns the home to see where their ambitions lie. Multi-generational living is always a topic of discussion. And aging in place is another key piece. For a lot of older homeowners who want to reside, they'll move into the new home in the backyard, stay close to their doctors, their family, their friends, and their neighborhood. And then they can rent out their 3-bedroom bungalow to a family in need coming off the wait list. Pardon me?
And they're rose bushes.
The rose bush, yeah, they'll take good care of them, and all sorts of benefits come from this, and including neighbor support, which is so cool. I won't go any further than to say Haven to Home is an ambition that actually started with a faith-driven charity in Kitchener. This has now been rolled out in Halton region, but the Haven to Home ambition is simply this. There are 33 families living in a woman's shelter for abused women in Burlington and Milton combined. There is nowhere for those families to move. And so our ambition is to inspire homeowners to think about what they can do on their property, create the space that's needed for one of these families to move into. The beauty of it is that the lease for this new unit will not be with the family, but with the agency. It's a head lease. So the money's going to flow. They'll get their full payment on time, every time. The family moves in, and we hope that after being in a shelter 6 months or 9 months or longer, that family's well known to the shelter staff, and they'll pick the family that's going to be best in that spot. But if for whatever reason let's say the partner comes back on the scene and there's other issues that come up. If that family needs to be rehoused, not unhoused, but rehoused back to the shelter or another property, because the agency has the head lease and the family is on a program that includes housing, the agency can move that family back into the appropriate housing venue immediately. It circumvents the landlord-tenant process, which we all know can be laborious at best. So that flexibility is another assurance for the homeowner. And I share this because ultimately the key piece is not only the bricks and mortar to provide that for the family, but there's a program called Homeward Bound, which some of you may know about. It was started with Wood Green in Toronto. Home Sweet Hope is the agency that operates it in Halton Region. So through all the great things falling into place together, Sheridan Colleges is providing free post-secondary education for the mom. All right, daycare and other family supports are provided by the agencies and outreach and all. And the success rate is staggering. Before COVID, 100% of women coming through the system actually got placed in their field of work and were able to move out of poverty, out of oppression, and onto a path forward. And today, because of COVID, there's been some restrictions, but it's still running at 85% success. So I share that with you because the formulas are there. The ability is there for us to make a difference. And it might be in a 600-unit building, or it could be one family at a time. But if we all work together, and if we don't know what we don't know now, we can learn together and grow. So I really ask that you consider, I'm just going to fly through, these are just some examples of what's happening out there in terms of detached homes and all the rest. A laneway suite in Hamilton, garage conversions are another possibility. And modular is popular not only on individual units of this nature, but also larger projects like this one in downtown Toronto. Phenomenal what's happening. Literally, that was built in a week. Amazing. All built in factory, shipped and craned onto site, done. All right, the interior took a bit more time, but ultimately it was there. So there's so many possibilities, and while we had planned on a sort of a different format today, maybe things happen for a reason, all right? And I ask you please to scan the QR code, please subscribe and contribute. There were several blue highlights that you saw on the screen there. There are questions that are driven by those blue highlights that we've looked at all the way through. I know you can't see them. I'm not asking you to. But if you provide us with your contact information, we'll send you the slide deck. We'll ask you to contribute your thoughts from these questions through emails, I guess. And altogether, we'll be much further ahead. I had no idea what was going to happen 2 weeks ago when we were offered this opportunity. I thank you for your patience and absorbing the thoughts. Love a Q&A, but we are out of time. So ultimately, if you can share your thoughts and ambitions electronically, and we do have a table at the networking session tomorrow morning, so I'd love to meet you all and spend more time in person that way. But please, contribute and collaborate, and let's grow together to make a difference, to provide every Canadian with the right to housing that is written in our laws, but we need to make sure that our voice changes law to reality. So I thank you all for your time. Thanks to all the presenters.